his way a tenderfoot, he says, but he's game and can be depended on. Have you made up your mind where she'll cross?" And he bent over the chart. The captain picked up a pair of compasses, balanced them for a moment in his fingers, and with the precision of a seamstress threading a needle, dropped the points astride a wavy line known as the steamer track. The engineer nodded. "That will give us about 22 hours leeway," he said gravely, "if we make 12 knots." "Yes, if you make 12 knots. Can you do it?" "I can't say. Depends on that gang of shovelers and the way they behave. They're a tough lot, jailbirds and tramps, most of 'em. If they get ugly, there ain't but one thing left. That, I suppose, you won't object to." The captain paused for a moment in deep thought, glanced at the pinprick in the chart, and said with a certain forceful meaning in his voice, "No, not if there's no other way." The chief engineer waited, as if for further reply, replaced his cap, and stepped out into the wind. He had got what he came for, and he had got it straight. With the closing of the door, the captain rolled up the chart, laid it in its place among the others, readjusted the thong of his sou'wester, stopped for a moment before a photograph of his wife and child, looked at it long and earnestly, and then mounted the stairs to the bridge. With the exception that the line of his mouth had straightened and the knots in his eyebrows tightened, he was, despite the smoking-room critics, the same bluff, determined sea-dog who had defied the manager the week before. Part 2. When Bonner, half an hour later, returned to the smoking-room, he too had caught the splash of the sea, the spray drenching the rail. The bum actor crossed over and took the seat beside him. The Texan was the only passenger who had spoken to him since he came aboard, and he had already begun to feel lonely. This time he started the conversation by brushing the salt spray from the agent's coat. "Got wet, didn't you? Too bad. Wait till I wipe it off." And he dragged a weak old handkerchief from his pocket. Then, seeing that the Texan took no notice of the attention, he added, "What did the captain want?" The Texan did not reply. He was evidently absorbed in something outside his immediate surroundings, for he continued to sit with bent back, his elbows on his knees, his eyes on the floor. Again the question was repeated. "What did the captain want? Nothing the matter, is there?" Fear had always been his master, fear of poverty mostly, and it was poverty in the worst form to others if he failed to get home. This thought had haunted him night and day. "Yes and no. Don't worry. It'll all come out right. You seem nervous." "I am. I've been through a lot and have almost reached the end of my rope. Have you got a wife at home?" The Texan shook his head. "Well, if you'd had, you'd understand better than I can tell you. I have, and a 3-year-old boy besides. I'd never have left them if I'd known. I came over under contract for a 6 months' engagement, and we were stranded in Pittsburgh and had hard work getting back to New York. Some of them are there yet. All I want now is to get home. Nothing else will save them. Here's a letter from her I don't mind showing you. You can see for yourself what I'm up against. The boy never was strong." The big Texan read it through carefully, handed it back without a comment or word of sympathy, and then, with a glance around him as if in fear of being overheard, asked, "Can you keep your nerve in a mix-up?" "Do you mean a fight?" queried the actor. "Maybe." "I don't like fights. Never did." Anything that would imperil his safe return was to be avoided. "I neither. But sometimes you've got to. Are you handy with a gun?" "Why?" "Nothing. I'm only asking." Carhart, the man who knew it all, here lounged over from his seat by the table and dropped into a chair beside them, cutting short his reply. The Texan gave a significant look at the actor, enforcing his silence, and then buried his face in a newspaper a month old. Carhart spread his legs, tilted his head back on the chair, slanted his stiff-brim hat till it made a thatch for his nose, and began one of his customary growls. To the room, to the drenched portholes, to the brim of his hat, as a half-asleep dog sometimes does when things have gone wrong with him, or he dreams they have. "This ship reminds me of another old tramp, the Persia," he drawled. "Same scrub crew and same cut of a captain. Hadn't been for two of the passengers and me, we'd never got anywhere. Had a fire in the lower hold and a lot of turpentine, and when they put that out we found her cargo had shifted and she was down by the head about 6 feet. Then the crew made a rush for the boats and left us with only 4 leaky ones to go 1,000 miles. They'd taken 'em all, hadn't been for me and another fellow who stood over 'em with a gun." The bum actor raised his eyes. "What happened then?" he asked in a nervous voice. "Oh, we pitched in and righted things, got into port at last. But the captain was no good. He'd 'a' left with the crew if we'd let him." "Is the shifting of a cargo a serious matter?" continued the actor. "This is my second crossing, and I'm not much up on such things." "Depends on the weather," interpolated a passenger. "And on how she's stowed," continued Carhart. "I've been mistrusting this ship ain't plumb on her keel. You can tell that from the way she falls off after each wave strikes her. I have been out on deck looking things over, and she seems to me to be down by the stern more than she ought." "Maybe she'll be lighter when more coal gets out of her," suggested another passenger. "Yes, but she's listed some to starboard. I watched her a while this morning. She ain't loaded right, or she's loaded wrong a purpose. That occurs sometimes with a gang of striking stevedores." The noon whistle blew, and the talk ended with the setting of everybody's watch, except the bum actor's, whose timepiece decorated a shop window in the Bowery. That night, one of those uncomfortable rumors, started doubtless by Carhart's talk, shivered through the ship, its vibrations even reaching the widow lying awake in her cabin. This said that some hundreds of barrels of turpentine had broken loose and were smashing everything below. If any one of them rolled into the furnaces, an explosion would follow which would send them all to eternity. That this absurdity was immediately denied by the purser, who asserted with some vehemence that there was not a gallon of turpentine aboard, did not wholly allay the excitement, nor did it stifle the nervous anxiety which had now taken possession of the passengers. As the day wore on, several additional rumors joined those already extant. One was dropped in the ear of the Texan by the bum actor as the two stood on the upper deck watching the sea, which was rapidly falling. "I got so worried I thought I'd go down into the engine room myself," he whispered. "I'm just back. Something's wrong down there, or I'm mistaken. I wish you'd go and find out. I knew that turpentine yarn was a lie, but I wanted to be sure, so I thought I'd ask one of the stokers who had come up for a little air. He was about to answer me when the chief engineer came down from the bridge, where he had been talking to the captain, and ordered the man below before he had time to fill his lungs. I waited a little while, hoping he or some of the crew would come up again, and then I went down the ladder myself. When I got to the first landing, I come bump up against the chief engineer. He was standing in the gangway fooling with a revolver he had in his hand as if he'd been cleaning it. 'I'll have to ask you to get back where you came from,' he said. 'This ain't no place for passengers.' And up I came. What do you think it means? I'd get ugly, too, if he kept me in that heat and never let me get a whiff of air. I tell you, that's an awful place down there. Suppose you go and take a look. Your knowing the captain might make some difference." "Were any of the stokers around?" "No, none of them. I didn't see a soul but the chief engineer, and I didn't see him more than a minute." The big Texan moved closer to the rail and again scrutinized the skyline, he had kept